Welcome to Political Dharma with me, Alan Zundel. In this whole last year, I've been covering the presidential campaign, focusing on the alternative candidates, that is, the independent and minor party candidates, rather than the major party candidates. And those of you who have been following my show know that I am not planning to vote for either of the major party candidates, and my reasons are various and complex, but I think both parties have been taking us in the wrong direction, and I would like to see a significant outside challenge presented in this election to at least capture the attention of the political class. Maybe a forlorn hope, but it is my hope in this election. I've also promised to my viewers that I would talk about my own thinking and feeling going into deciding who I was going to vote for, not so much because I'm trying to persuade anybody how to vote, or have strong opinions about how other people should vote. I don't. But because I want to be transparent as far as I can and letting you know where I'm coming from and how I think about these things. So first of all, I don't want to criticize anyone in who they decide to vote for, and I'm not going to argue with you about your choice of presidential candidate to vote for. I think it's a waste of time this late in the campaign especially, but also for a couple of other even more important reasons. First of all, I think people make the mistake of confusing the fact that it matters who becomes president with the falsehood that it therefore matters who you vote for president, because I don't think your vote has all that much influence over who wins the election. Now, your vote is only one of millions in your state, and of those millions of people, there is a large segment who is automatically going to vote for one or the other political parties because that's what they've done over the years, and they haven't seriously considered other parties. They're happy with their own party, and they will do that. And that means that in some states, there's enough Democrats who are going to vote Democratic that the Democratic candidate is going to win that state's electoral votes no matter how you vote. And there's other states where the Republicans are going to vote Republican and overwhelm the Democrats, and it doesn't matter how you vote either. So in most of the states, there is that are not swing states, so-called swing states, no matter which way you go, you're not going to affect it very much because there's so many other people who have already determined they're going to support one major party or the other. And there's another large segment of people who are only going to consider, even if they're not attached to one of the major parties, they're only going to consider the major party candidates as potential candidates to vote for. So your vote is going to be overwhelmed by however the majority in that state votes. And in a podcast like this, where I reach at best a couple thousand people, and that's at best, lately it's been more in the realm of a few hundred, I don't have any delusions that I'm going to be a big influence on enough people to determine the outcome, even in the swing states, let alone the non-swing states. So your vote is only one among millions, and if you're not in a swing state, it's not going to count very much anyway. So that's one reason I don't think it's worth arguing about or worth too much angst over who you determine you're going to vote for. Now, if you are in a swing state, that could be a different consideration. If you have strong reasons to vote for one candidate or the other of the major party candidates, I understand that, and I don't think I'd want to argue out of that position. I wouldn't even want to at this point, because this is my second thing. My first reason for not wanting to make a big deal out of how other people vote is that I don't think our votes count all that much. The second reason is I think our judgment about these decisions is so complicated that we can't even understand ourselves fully. Now, we all have different sources of information that we turn to or that we trust, and there's a lot of different sources of information out there. Of course, the field is dominated by the mainstream news that will give you a certain kind of picture, and independent news sources like this have a variety of viewpoints that they present. So you've already chosen where your source of information is and whether you're going to trust them and how far. And there's a lot of things we don't know about. We simply can't know everything there is to know about the candidates or the people they're going to bring into office with them, or the crises that they're going to face, or what's really going on in the world entirely, how the economy is faring. All that stuff we have to rely on other sources for because we cannot observe it directly. Nobody can, not even people involved in politics, have a direct access to everything that's happening within the government or everything that's happening around the world that could influence how people in the government, what kind of problems they're presented with. So we just don't have a full picture of things, and our limited view is not necessarily, but often restricted to sources of information that are partial and filter out information that diverges from the perspective that we started out with. That is selective perception, perception? I forget. There's another term for it, I think. But that is, we pay more attention to facts that confirm our assumptions than the facts that seem to contradict our assumptions. Beyond facts and reasoning, we also have all these background assumptions about human nature, whether people are generally good and well-meaning, and there's a few bad apples there, or people are generally greedy, self-centered, and prone to violence, and it takes special circumstances to produce people who do not act in that way, or it takes a strong government to keep in check people's propensity to do bad things. So different views of human nature, very different views probably of what the major forces affecting politics and the economy are, very different views about what's important to pay attention to and what's in the world. So a lot of background assumptions that are built on years of experience, even childhood experiences with authority, like how your parents are, or even genetics, who knows, your leanings towards trusting people or not trusting people, towards being more conscious of threats in the environment or more willing to take risks. All those personality traits that are hard to decipher where they're coming from, you just can't argue people out of those things. So our picture of the world is built on so many, disparate pieces of information and disparate views of other human beings and the world around us, that it would take a long, long conversation for two people to come closer together and to begin to understand, at least to some extent, where each other is coming from. That's why I don't want to get into arguments about who you should vote for president, because it would really require, it just leads you into a deeper and deeper conversation about other things, which I think is a good thing, but people get frustrated because it's not so easy to convince people. There's the assumption sometimes that if we present a fact, that the other person will be persuaded by that, but that's not necessarily true. You have to go into all those background assumptions and different sources of information, what information they have and they don't have, what information you have and don't have yourself. So all that stuff goes into it. All right, so those are two reasons why I think it's not worth arguing about who you vote for president. Number one, because your vote doesn't really matter all that much in most situations. It may matter in the swing state, but even there, you're one among many people who are determining at the last minute which way they're going to go. And number two, just because our considerations that go into this are so complex that it's hard to completely untangle them. So what do I have to talk about if it's all that complex to decide how to vote? I'll talk about on the surface level what I see here. As I said, I would like to see a challenge presented to the two major party candidates and see a large vote going towards other candidates. I don't see any of these other alternative candidates with a strong enough lead, or at least I don't have any information that would lead me to believe that they're so far in advance of the others that we should all rally behind them. People often say if all the third parties got together behind one candidate, they can make a bigger impact. Well, true, that's a very difficult thing to do, because even if a candidate's far ahead, and if I think that candidate is totally wrong about everything and is not somebody whose message I would support, I would be reluctant to support them even if they were far in advance. So it has to be a candidate that has strong support and is somewhat compatible with my views. And right now, I don't see someone with enough strong support to say we should all rally behind them. There's a few candidates who are fairly close to my views, but none of the candidates or parties actually totally represent my viewpoint. And at some point, I may try to launch my own political party. But, as long as I'm engaging in hopeless things, I may as well do something that I think expresses my views more clearly. All right. So getting down to it now, the candidates, the major party candidates. Now, why do I reject Donald Trump and Kamala Harris? Or better put, why do I not see one as being any better than the other or any more attractive to voting for me? Now, again here, I'm going to give you a very brief summary of how I see the candidates, and it would take much longer conversations to argue out each of these points. So you're free in the comments to say what you want to say and contradict me and disagree with me, but I'm probably not going to engage with that to any great extent because it seems a little futile to me. But the main issue on, let's say, let's start with both of them first of all. I think neither of them, when I try to ask myself, what significant positive accomplishment has either of these candidates achieved, I have a hard time coming up with anything. Now with Kamala Harris, I know something about her career, but I don't associate her with any major policy achievements. When I listen to her over the years, I've heard her go back and forth on various issues, so it's hard to tell where she really stands on things or if she's just wishy-washy and constantly changing her views. It's fine if people change their views with new information, but if you're in a public office, at least you should be able to not change too frequently. The strongest case I can make for Kamala Harris is that I think she would do something to protect the women's right to make choices about reproduction. I think that's a good thing, even though I have reservations about the number of abortions in this country. I don't think it should be the government determining how individual women should make that choice. So I do think she would be stronger on that, but that's one issue out of many. The principal thing they seem to be leaning on is the protection of democracy, of democratic processes, and making Trump the villain in this. Yet I do not see the Democratic Party as in the forefront of the battle for a more democratic system of government. Kamala Harris herself, if you look at how she came up politically, she did not reach the position of vice president or presidential nominee through any democratic process. She's picked by Joe Biden to be vice presidential nominee, and she didn't have strong support from the general public for that position. And she was picked by the funders of Biden's campaign for being the leading candidate for replacing Biden. And they got in early and fast to try to make sure she was picked. So that's not a very democratic process. And when I look back on the 2016 and 2020 elections, not only presidential, but in a lot of congressional races, the Democratic Party has done a lot to try to block progressive Democrats from getting anywhere. So not in the case of 2024, they tried to keep any primary challenge away from Joe Biden, even though Joe Biden was already showing signs of decline in his ability to perform in office. They tried to keep other people out of the race actively and tried to rig the primary so he wouldn't have challenges. I remember a few occasions like this early on, like in New Hampshire, they weren't going to allow it to go first as it traditionally had because they were afraid that some other candidate might get an early head start and present a major challenge to them. So they wanted to reshuffle, despite the law in New Hampshire that said they had to be first. They wanted to pressure New Hampshire not to go first and to get a more friendly, Biden-friendly state like North Carolina to go first. And then throughout this campaign season, as I've detailed in this show over and over, the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee, and the groups that they fund and back have been doing everything possible to keep any competition off the general election ballot, whether that be Cornel West, Jill Stein, Robert F. Kennedy, anybody they thought might at all be a challenge to them on some issue that they were neglecting, they tried to keep them out. So I don't see them as being, I don't see Kamala Harris as being a defender of democracy or her party. I see her mostly using that as an issue against Trump. So when they say they want to defend democracy, what they're saying is they want to defend the Democratic Party against losing to Donald Trump. Now, there are concerns that I share about what Donald Trump might do to undercut free and fair elections, but I just don't see the Democratic Party as being, I see it as being somewhat better, but not by enough to make a significant difference in this. So positive on abortion, negative on democratic process, and in the case of the economy, who's a better manager of the economy, which is always a big question. I'll get to that after I talk about Donald Trump a little bit. Okay, so here's my thumbnail impression of Donald Trump. The best thing I can say about him, starting with the positive, is he reduced tensions with Russia, most likely. We are heading into a war with Russia and the risk of a nuclear exchange and causing turmoil in that part of the world. Now people say, well, Russia invaded Ukraine. There's a much longer history behind this, and I think we have to take responsibility that the United States, from the 1990s onward, that is the Clinton administration onward, we have been pushing to try to reduce any Russian influence in their area of the world that they reside in, and trying to extend our military reach into those regions, moving NATO bases closer and closer, even though we said we wouldn't. So I see Trump as at least backing away from that kind of neoconservative influence in both parties, which have wanted to maintain a United States dominance over the rest of the world. That's a positive thing. Now, on his signature issue, which I would say is immigration, I see immigration as a problem, and partially a problem created by both the Republicans and Democrats in their refusal to come to any compromise about passing a bill that could better manage the situation. But I do not see it as a national crisis. I think it's vastly exaggerated when you blame immigration for problems in the economy or for crime or for voting fraud. I think all those things are exaggerations, and immigration has very little to do with any of them. So I see him as a positive on Russia and a big negative on the issue that he regards as a signature issue. I think by scapegoating immigrants, he's just causing more tension in this country, more various kinds of prejudice against different types of people from other countries, people of other colors, to feel a permission to act on those kind of impulses. Let's get to the economy then. Is one party or the other better on the economy? Well, first of all, I do not think the president has all that much power to change the world economy or even the national economy, because the national economy is subject to the influences of the world economy. I just don't see them having the power to do that. Where presidents do have some power to influence the economy, I don't think it shows up for at least a few years, which would mean after their term of office. So I don't see either candidate as having any especially strong credentials to be able to improve the economy, or to, as they call it, manage the economy. As a business person, even if you believe that Donald Trump was a good business person, which I wouldn't, I don't think that applies to government. A government is not a business. It does not have the single sole measure of success of gaining a profit for investors. It's just more complicated than that. So I don't think his background experience is any recommendation for managing the economy. He takes credit for having a good economy in the first couple of years of his being in office before the pandemic hit. But I did not see a significant improvement from the last couple of years of Barack Obama's administration. It seemed like after the financial crisis of 2008 that the steps that the government took to stabilize the economy, not to give relief to the people that were hurt by the economic fallout, but to stabilize the economy in general, the financial system in particular, I think that carried over from Barack Obama's administration to Trump's administration. And I don't know what Trump did to make it better. He did send checks out during the pandemic, and everybody welcomed those, but I wouldn't expect those checks to keep flowing all the time. Although I would like to see some type of guaranteed basic income. I don't think that's going to come from either of those candidates. So I don't think either of the candidates is going to be able to manage the economy, and I don't think either of them have shown signs that they're capable of creating a better economy unless they pressure the Federal Reserve in some way to make certain kind of decisions that could help or hurt the economy. The Federal Reserve Bank has a lot more to do with economic well-being, even though they don't have, that significant a role trying to manage how complex an economy can be, but they have a bigger role than the president. But my fear would be, I don't think Kamala Harris would try to pressure the Federal Reserve. I think Trump would, but not necessarily for a better economy, more for his political advantage. I do worry about Trump's arbitrariness and his erraticness. That one of the good things I could say about him is that he feels less constrained by the big donors and the established political elites, so that he may be able to do some good things that were another candidate like Kamala Harris, who's much more beholden to big donors and big corporations. I think he might be able to do some good. I'm not sure that he would do that good. He might do it accidentally or intentionally in some areas, I don't know, but that same arbitrariness means he could do a lot of damage to the country by making decisions on ill-founded ground. So that's my assessment of them. Now, the minor party candidates, as I've said, there's no one that completely represents my views, but I do see Chase Oliver of the Libertarian Party and Jill Stein of the Green Party as being in the lead because they're on the most ballots and their parties have been established for decades now and have a certain percentage of the vote that they usually get. So they have loyal voters. So I see them both as being candidates who, if you had any sympathy with their point of view, in some important respect, could be a good voice for you. And that's what I've determined to do, to pick one of these minor party or independent candidates that at least is in some respects close to my views, or at least closer than the other candidates, and vote for them out of hope that the combined vote for all these alternative candidates shows the dissatisfaction that we have with the whole system. Jill Stein, I actually think that as a individual, she has enough intelligence and a knowledge base and maturity to make decisions as a president. Not that I think she'll get anywhere close to the Oval Office, but I could envision her actually as a competent president. And I do agree with her on a lot of issues. Chase Oliver, harder to assess. He's younger, doesn't have as much experience. I do agree with some libertarian positions, not with others, as I've said in the past. Beyond that, I don't see any contenders that is easy for me to picture in the role of president or that has a strong enough base of support that they would be worth throwing my support to. So that's where I'm at. I'm sure you'll all have things to say about that, why you agree with me, why you disagree with me. I'm always interested in reading what you have to say. But again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time arguing about who to vote for president, because I just, at this point, I want to see what happens and then analyze that and determine where people like me go from here. Or by people like me, I mean primarily the people that are terribly dissatisfied with the two-party system and concerned about the direction of the country overall. Where do we go from here? What are we going to do? All right, so once again, thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your interest, and keep it civil if you can. Thanks. Bye.